Hi, everybody. I'm Paola Harris, and this is one of the master classes I'm so excited to do. And I'm doing it with Desta Barnabe, who's a very, very close friend of mine. We've known each other, I think, for at least 20 years. Has it been that long, Desta?
It's been over 10 for sure.
I know. So, yeah,
A long time.
yeah. And the thing is that we talk about this all the time because even though I do work in investigative reporting in the UFO field, the idea that what we call a paranormal, which is really normal, the idea of consciousness, the idea of using remote viewing, the idea of ESP abilities, or what I call direct thought transfer, is part of it. There is no separation from the kind of work I do. And I don't separate it into categories because in the contact reports, and Desta could touch on this if you want to touch on it later, any kind of communication has been direct thought transfer. I don't think who's visiting this planet goes to school to learn Chinese, Italian, French, or Spanish. So it has to be a way of communication that they have developed that we don't encourage in this country, and we encourage in Western world, because when you do direct thought transfer, like the indigenous people say, you can't lie. You can't make up things. It is a direct feeling. It is a direct thought. It is a communication that is very, very authentic. Because when my kids were small, I really always thought that they should be teaching this in school. I thought that especially some kids that are enormously talented in ESP and are able to sense things should have been encouraged. But in Western culture, in Western education, it is discouraged because it is some kind of negative, I don't know, under woo-woo, it is a negative kind of thing that some child would know what you're thinking, some child could predict the future or something. And I think in indigenous cultures, the original peoples, that was accepted. So, even though I'm going to talk about the background of what I've been trying to promote with ESP and remote viewing, I think the future, if they could get it together, even in magnet schools or in alternative education, they should think about encouraging this kind of communication, this kind of wonderful kind of unity of peoples, because it doesn't discriminate. I always say that the ET contact comes from this. They mastered this. This is not in the brain. This is part of consciousness. So, and another thing about this is that the more that you learn it, I remember in the early days, in the New Age days, I went to class on, on taking an object and trying to get vibrations from it. And I remember, we had to write down what we got. What is that called, Desta, when you have an object?
Psychometry.
Yeah, psychometry. Yeah. And I didn't realize, but I was really good at it. And what I realized when we did it, because I did it with a bunch of friends, is that the more that you do it, the better you are at it. So it's practice. And so in those days, we were looking at each other's auras. And what are those days? 1980s, the 1980s, because it was all part of the New Age movement. So in the beginning of the introduction of this particular masterclass, I've always been interested in this. And by coincidence or design, I got to meet Uri Geller in Italy. Uri Geller is he's known as a psychic medium, a spoon bender, but I'm convinced Uri Geller is a hybrid of some kind. Uri Geller is, they have called him a magician. They've called him all kinds of names. But I read the books on Uri, and what I ended up doing is going to visit Russell Targ in California, in Palo Alto, and I said, did he do these things? Did you put him in a Faraday cage underwater? Did he move the needle on a compass? Did he do these things? And Russell said, yes, he did. And I said, could he, communicate psychically? And Russell said he did. So when I met him in Italy with a friend of mine who's a psychic from Belgium, and Uri was playing with him. And he said to Pascal, my friend from Belgium, who is also a psychic, he said, would you draw something on a piece of paper? And Pascal drew a daisy flower. And Uri turned around, he had a piece of paper and he drew the same daisy, the same size. And I was shocked. And then, of course, he bent spoons for everybody because I had friends with me. What I didn't ever see before is I have a pilot friend who had 2 kids and said, can you bend 2? So Uri takes 2 together. He took 2 together and he bent both of them. And he said to me, look, Paula, they're going to do it while I've got them in the air. And I'm watching the 2 of them bend together. So, I mean, that's part of what talents he has. But one of the things that he said, and I noticed something too, because I went to Ireland to see a show of his, he was extremely tired and he asked Pascal and me to come to his dressing room. He was really tired. I noticed that when he got on stage, he asked the kids to come up and sit around him. And I realized as he's doing that and he's trying to bend spoons and so forth, that he's using the children's energy. He's using their energy because he's telling them, say, bend, bend, bend. And all these kids are saying, bend, bend. So I'm convinced that there's female energy that's powerful and children energy that's very powerful. Very close friend of mine who was in the audience in Italy when I was with Uri, and I was very close to Uri. I was in his dressing room and everything. My friend who's a pilot, he basically had the key in his pocket bent and couldn't get back into his hotel room. So that was from far away. And then Uri gave me a package of closed seats, closed. It was brand new. I mean, I think they were Brussels sprouts or whatever. And he went on a stage, opened up the package. I was in the dressing room, so I saw it was closed. And he closed his hand and he said, sprout, sprout. And when he opened his hand, there were little green leaves on this. And he goes, instead of giving them to me, which I would have loved to have them, I would have framed them, he went and gave them to my pilot friend who had them. So, these are things that probably in other cultures and in other dimensions and in other planets are normal. But here they're like weirdness. And I think that Desta and I both agree that this kind of talent, this kind of sensibility would help us so much in our everyday life. It would help you disseminate who you're talking to when you meet people, because you can feel it, on a psychic level. You can say, oh, well, I might not be friends with these people because they're not, as honest as I think they are. It'll help you like find your car keys. I always say, if you could just, stay in a quiet space, ESP can help you with the most normal of events. What happens to me is the stuff that happens. I keep calling synchronicities. Like I'll turn on the radio, I'll know what song is coming on, or just a whole list of things that my intuition. But I've never questioned my intuition. My intuition has to be active as an investigative journalist, and I'm interviewing people. Otherwise, they'll make huge mistakes and my name will be attached to it. So my intuition has to be, the sixth sense has to be part of what I do. And I really have used it a lot, but mostly people need to know that the government uses it. In other words, when I talked to Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut, he's the one that paid for Uri Geller to be examined at Stanford. But it came from the CIA, because in those days, there was no spy planes. You couldn't know what they were doing. So the CIA paid for the remote viewers of the early days. And like Colonel Corso always told me, these kinds of things are used for military purposes before they're used for everyday, useful purposes. If you can convince the military it's part of their war games or their modus operandi, then you can get money for it. You can get grants for it. So I hope that Desta talks about third eye spies, because Russell was a good friend of mine, but he was part of that CIA stuff in the beginning. But what Russell was shocked about was that he was good at it too. I mean, these were physicists, Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, and all these guys are, and Ingo Swann, my God. I met Ingo Swann, probably the greatest remote viewer ever. And if you can get his book Penetration, I think it's like $400 on Amazon. He talks about remote viewing or psychic ability, seeing the dark side of the moon, seeing mining and habitation of beings there. And they knew he was looking at them, he said. When I saw Ingo Swann at the remote viewing conference, I walked out the door with him because I wanted him to tell me personally I'd read his book. And by the way, that is a key. You got to read somebody's book so you can ask them intelligent questions. I said, Ingo, you said there was life on the dark side of the moon. Is that true? And he looked at me and he said, also on the light side. So Ingo was used in those days for these purposes. But the remote viewing conference that I attended, I covered him. I covered Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann and, Russell Targ and those guys. One of the things that made me a little nervous was they did testing. And I talked about to Desta if we wanted to do some testing or some kind of thing like that too. They did testing in the audience, and my fear was that the ones that were really, really good, they were looking at for military purposes. In other words, if they did some testing, whether it be with cards, so that you had to guess the cards, you had to guess the number, you had to guess what image it was, you had to draw something. My biggest fear was that since all the audience was filled with intelligence people too, they would go after these people to use them. Now that we know for a fact the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries, because there's books written about them in the 70s and 80s, psychic abilities behind the Iron Curtain. They were using it, but I think that they thought it was more normal. It was hidden from us until it was declassified. But I don't want to think, Edgar said, look, he said, the way I got the money for Uri was that I talked to Werner von Braun because he had a psychic grandmother. He helped us, get the funding to do this, but it was for military remote viewing. When I think of remote viewing, I think of it being used for military purposes. When I think of psychic ability, I think of it being used for us, even having fun with it, and even with your significant other, if you have psychic ability, if you have a way of communicating with them that is nonverbal, it makes for much, much better relationship. So I am going to post on my Facebook and my Patreon the panel I had with, in fact, it was part of the conference that I did in Laughlin with Uri Geller, long distance from Israel. I reunited him with Russell Targ. But I had a panel with Angela Smith, who's remote viewer, famous remote viewing, Paul Smith, who was the head of the Remote Viewing Society. I think I had Adam Curry on that panel, and I definitely had Russell Targ involved there somehow. So I want to do that. I'm going to put that on my Facebook and I'm going to put this one on my Facebook so that people get lessons in how to really use this for one's benefit, for one's life. I want to put that on my Patreon, and I think all my Patreon members, this work is, it's all out of my pocket. There's no huge grants from NASA or the CIA or anybody. And so Patreon for me is very important. And the other thing is that I really think that in this day and age, using the sixth sense to come together as one part of humanity, to come together to see that we have more in common than we have differences, would really benefit the planet. So that's mainly my experiences. I use it. I call it synchronicity. It's all over the place. The more that I feel it, the more it happens. So that's part of my presentation. And I'm so grateful to Desta for doing a PowerPoint on it. I wouldn't have even known when to start it, but she's going into all of the part that you can use, including dowsing. So Desta, take it away.
Thank you, Paula. This is my very first PowerPoint ever, so I can't promise it's going to be fantastic, but I wanted just to do a really quick understanding, just for people that don't have like the basics of a few of the things that we're going to be talking about, psychic abilities. So let me share. I think I just have to do that. Oh yeah. Okay, is that good? Can you see that?
That looks great.
All right, so this is just a handful of things, the remote viewing, dowsing, and QHHT, things that we wanted to include in this presentation that had to do with psychic abilities that people could use themselves, and I included a few easy ways to practice, and this is just a very, 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 very brief rundown of each modality that we're talking about today. So remote viewing is I have to move this screen. Hold on. Is the ability to, there you go, receive information about a target using ESP. So there's different ways that people use targets, but one of them is the way that I did it and the way that I'm going to talk about in this, and this is a lot of the ways that the CIA was doing it as well, is just really with a number, and that's called a target number of whatever the target actually was. So these targets could be events, they could be people, places, objects, locations, and they could be in the distant past or in the future, or just something that's happening in the present. And they are all distant from the viewer, meaning that the viewer obviously is just sitting at their house, or like I was doing, I was just sitting at my house and I was working on a target, which was just a number, and it could have been a people, place, object, or location. So like Paula said, SRI, or Stanford Research Institute, and the Cognitive Science Lab are the ones that really put remote viewing on the map. I think I've read a few times that there was other people that were doing it in the late 40s actually, and running experiments themselves. But what put remote viewing on the map was definitely when SRI was running these experiments, and they were run from 1972 to 1995. And the big one that most people know about it was called Project Stargate, and that was with the CIA and the DIA, and that's when they started investigating psychic phenomena. And like Paula said, it was there was big Chinese psychic remote viewers and people doing psychic investigations there, and in the Iron Curtain behind in Russia and in the Eastern Bloc as well. So of course the military wants to, look into this kind of thing, because a lot of the targets that they were doing at the time were trying to find out about hidden documents. I think Pat Price was one of the ones that was really good with reading documents, and he could actually go into in Russia, he was going into like filing cabinets and actually looking at documents, trying to figure out where nuclear facilities was, if they had the capabilities of having nuclear investigating some things, but also trying to see if they were, you know, setting up nukes there. So they were looking at different places to see if they could actually find out if there was a nuke program going on, and a whole slew of other things. But Stargate is the main one that people talk about, where the CIA was involved and they were actually starting to investigate this. So just like Paula said too, there's tons of famous remote viewers, but the big ones from these programs that we're talking about are, like she said, Ingo Swann, Uri Geller, Pat Price, Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff, Joe McMoneagle, Skip Atwater, Ed Dames, Paul Smith, Courtney Brown, and Dale Graff. Some of the cases they help solve, there's a whole bunch of things that they help for in different ways. But again, when it was used in a military sense, they were looking for things in a military way like this. 1976, there was a lost Soviet plane was found with the use of remote viewing. Saddam Hussein's capture just a few years ago was used with remote viewing. The 1979 Iran hostage situation, they got information from that through remote viewing. There was a couple cases of KGB agents that were caught in South Africa, and customs agents on the run, and those were all helped. The people were helped being caught from remote viewers. So I just wanted to do a really brief, just so you could see what a remote viewing session looks like. And it's very easy, and I wanted to do this because this is something you can do at home as well. But this is the way that, well, you know, a lot of people that are working with a tasker and a viewer. So you could do this yourself, and I'll go through that a little bit later, but just so you get an idea of like what an example of a remote viewing session is. This is the first one. I was working with a friend of mine who also actually works with people that started the that Stargate program. And she still works with those people today from the CIA that started Stargate. And she was my teacher for a while. And this is an example of my very first target practice with her. So it always goes, the way that you look at a target is always just through a number. You don't want any information. You don't want to be front loaded with any information. So all you're looking at is a number. So the way that we did it was her initials and then my initials. So it's PCDB001, because this was my very first target practice with her. And so there's three parts, three really easy to remember, like sections or parts of a remote viewing session. And the first part is the intention agreement, which is really just her finding a target for me. And how we used to do it is she would just say, Desta, I printed off a photo from the internet of something. It could be, like I said before, it could be an event, a person, a place, a thing, an object. It could be anything. I printed off a photo for you. I'm calling it PCDB001, and I have that photo in a manila envelope on top of my desk. And however you want to try and look at it, you can either astral travel here and search through my desk and go through the envelope, you know, on my desk, or you can, you know, psychic, like do whatever you think that you can do, but this is where it is. And, you know, this is how we're going to start it. So that's her choosing the target. And she just sent me an email with the target, and I have to accept it. So I just say, yes, I accept this target, and I will start working on it this week. So the second part is obviously when the viewer actually does the viewing. And so I have the target, and I'll go through it in a sec of exactly, you know, like the order of what I was doing. And, and then I send it back to her, you know, what I got. So all I have is a number, this PCDB001, and I do a session. It could be a couple hours. It could be 15 minutes. You could go through it a couple times a day for a couple days, whatever you want. I would just usually do it for maybe half an hour one day, half an hour the next day, and then I would just send it to her. And, and then of course she would send me back the photo. So once she knows what I got and all the information I got, I would be drawing, I would be typing up like the information that I had, but most of it I would just draw on like a big pad of paper. And I would take photos of it and send it to her. Then the feedback, which would be, she would send me the photo of what it was, and then she would give me her feedback. So she would really just pick apart every single thing I said and say, you know, you were right on with this, this could be because of this, and you know, you were a little bit off with this or whatever. So, and so here is my first target with her. And so this was the target. It was Victoria Falls in Africa. And so this is what I got. So this is right off the bat. Here is what I got, the PCDB01, and that is the number that is associated with this photo. So this is the target number. I would just put the date and the time, and then the first thing that most remote viewers use is an ideogram. So this ideogram is basically just, as soon as you focus on the number that you're doing, you just, this is like a gestalt. It's just like a quick twitch, and you just let your pen on the paper do whatever. You don't think about it. It's like an unconscious, just little scribble that you let your hand do. And it's supposed to be something like, you know, somewhere in your subconscious, you're connecting with the target. And then this is kind of a visual representation of what subconsciously you already think that the target is. And interestingly enough, a lot of people think that ideograms actually look like the target. So, and I've gone through a whole kind of my ideograms to see this, and it actually does sometimes. So you can kind of see how this is like, how these waves and like a very mix of like water flowing down and then the mist spraying back up or something like that. I don't know if everyone's does that, but I've gone through all of mine, and almost all of them I actually see that. But anyways, it's just supposed to be a quick little scribble. And what I do is I focus on this number, PCDB01, and I touch my pen to different parts of this ideogram. And what that's supposed to do is, the whole thing kind of is a representation of what the target is, but I know that there's other places, like I think Farsight Institute uses this as a timeline. So it's kind of like, as you go through it, it's also a timeline. So if you're looking at an event instead of just a photo, you can kind of press your pen on the beginning of it to kind of probe into what you think the beginning of that event is, and keep touching your pen to go through the timeline of the event, with which the end obviously being, you know, the end of the event kind of thing. So for just like a still photo like this, I would just keep touching my pen with different parts of this ideogram, knowing and assuming that the intent, like my intention is there, that I know that this is what's going to give me some information. And here's some of the things I got from this gestalt is I got closed in, cove, dark, and light at the end. And this is like the little picture I drew, and with all these lines running down, and here's the sun shining over here. And then behind this structure, I got there was a tunnel or a cave. And I put taste dust, which was wrong in this case. And then I put cold and damp or wet and green moss on rocks. Then the following day, I did another little half an hour or whatever. And I got a little bit more information. So I put the same target number. I did a different ideogram, and I got lava tube, penetrating deep, circle of light, gentle waves, humming noise, rumble, body of water, smelled sweet like floral, relaxing breeze, and a low tone. And then I sent it to her, and she sent me back the picture, of course. And then this is just her feedback. So, you know, she's saying that I drew multiple horizontal lines representing the fall of the water, and that here she says the moss on rocks were actually trees and foliage. But if you look at this photo quickly, it kind of could be moss on rocks, but it was just a misinterpretation of, the moth was a misinterpretation for the little bushes or trees or whatever on here. And then she put your description of a tunnel and cave track with the dark indentations where the basalt rock is showing through the falling torrents of water. And then she sent me a little link here that says that Victoria Falls is basalt and dark volcanic rock. And there are lava tubes. That's the underlying geology of Victoria Falls. Oops. And I can't have to move this now. And then I also got this lava tube penetrating deep, blah, blah, blah. So she just says that that was all on track. And so this is just that's just like, so that's all it is. That's all a remote viewing session is. Sometimes you get it really, really close. Like this was, I was lucky. This was my very first try at it. And I got a lot of it quite accurate. And you could really tell some of the things like this moss on rocks, how you can kind of, once you see the picture, you could kind of see where you go wrong and where you maybe some things are misrepresented. You can't really tell what it is. And you can see how your own mind and your psyche is working with the picture. And I was saying caves and lava tubes and stuff, which you can't even see from this picture. But like she said, it is the part of the geology. This is volcanic. And so the whole thing underneath these falls is lava tubes. So it's strange things to be able to get, but it was my first impressions, and a lot of people are really good at this. You don't have to think you have any other kind of psychic abilities at all. It's just the main thing about remote viewing and all these other things we're talking about is you can't think while you're doing it. It's just first impressions. So you have to just try to not interpret things and to not think about it and to not guess. You're just taking, all you have is a number and you're just trying to get information and feedback from that number. So you could see how you could do this with your friends, right? Me and my partner, we just spent half an hour or whatever the other weekend, and we both were in 2 different rooms, and we both just went online and typed in like historic photos or natural photos or, nature photos or something. And we just saved about 40 images, random images of different things on the internet, and then went over the title and just typed a 5 or 6 digit number to label it. And then, so we each had 40, and then we put it in a big pile in one folder. So we have 80 targets now, all with just random numbers on top of them. And now we just practice just for 15 minutes, a couple times a week. And we just pick the random numbers, and then we both take 15 minutes, try and see what we can get. And then we go back into the file and look up what the image is. So it's really easy. And I have that here. It's really easy to be able to practice this with someone else if you want, but also you can do this by yourself, because there are lots of different, I used to only know of one, but I just looked a week or 2 ago, and there's actually lots of different sites right now. If you type like remote viewing targets, there's lots of sites which just have pages and pages of boxes with a number in it. And so you just do the exact same thing. You write the number down, you spend 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever you want, and then go back to that page, find that box and click on it. And then the tab, or the tile flips over and they show you what the picture is. So you really can do this yourself, do it a couple times, whenever you want. And like Paula said, it's all about practice. Anyone can do any of these things. I don't, personally, I don't think that this has anything to do with people being special or only some people are born with this ability. I think as long as you practice, you can do any of this stuff. So I think the ideogram is very important. For me, it's very important. So this is all you have to do. Get a number, go online, make a little scribble with your hand, and then just sit there and like clear your mind and try and write down the very first impressions that you get. And you should be, once you're struggling and you can't get anything else, then you should really go into your senses and say, like, do I smell anything? Do I taste anything? Do I see anything? Do I feel anything? And that's really it. So anyone could be practicing this, anyone can be doing this. Russell Targ says that you do not have to take a class. You can just, this is how you do it. You don't really need to do anything. You don't need to be learning how to do this from anyone. You just need to sit down and practice it. So the next thing I have here is dowsing. I am a dowser. I've been doing it for a long time, at least 20 years, maybe 30 years. But it's just another thing that anyone can do, and all you have to do is practice. So dowsing is a type of divination through which you could get yes or no answers. There is a few other answers that you could get, but generally it's a you can ask a yes or no question. Dowsing has been used for thousands of years to find water, gems, minerals, energy lines, a whole slew of things. But initially, it was used, here's a little picture here. They used to use hazel or willow trees, and they would just cut a piece off where it was like a Y, and it's called a Y rod. And they would be able to walk over, you know, fields and be able to see if they could find gems, minerals, water, all this kind of stuff, especially water. The army, mining companies, the government, property developers, water companies, and farmers all today still use dowsing for those purposes. But today, it's much more varied. I can hardly think of an area that you can't use dowsing in, because it's literally anything that you can narrow down to a yes or no answer, but also things that you can narrow down into lots of different answers. So here's some examples of ways you can use dowsing. A lot of people do this in a lot of like old ancient sites where there might have been wars or sorry, I'm hearing my dog. So a lot of things that you could use it for, and this is like places that you could locate graves. I actually use this at a dog park in Winnipeg. I used to take my dog to about 10 years ago. And one of the guys there said, oh, I heard that there was like people buried in one side of this, like, you know, part that wasn't really, it was like off. We weren't supposed to be walking there, but it was like a forest part of the dog park. And he said, I heard that there was graves over there. And I took my dowsing rods out there and I found 5 or 6 graves, like my L rod said were graves. And I told him, and he actually got someone out, I don't know who, the city out there to look for the graves. And about a year later, I don't know what they did, but they ended up putting up a huge memorial, because I don't know if they dug them up or I don't know how they ended up finding them, but they found that there was a bunch of graves there. And, you know, even though that dog park was there for 20 years, they just discovered the graves, and there's a big memorial up there now. You can also find, with dowsing, you can also look for so many things, but here's just some. So like auras, to see if there's like problems with the aura, how strong your aura is. Portals in people's houses when they move to new houses. Sometimes there's negative or positive, good positive vibes coming out for like a meditation spot. And sometimes there's open, you know, energetic places like portals where negative things are coming out. Negative earth lines, there's things called cancer lines. A lot of people sleep on negative earth lines, and a lot of times dowsers will get them just to move their bed a couple feet away from it, or move their chair a couple feet away so they're not sitting on these negative lines. It's used for missing people, pets, buried treasure, preferred vitamins or foods or minerals or pharmaceutical drugs that you should be taking, or what would be best for your body at this time. You can ask through a pendulum or through dowsing. Food allergies, intolerances, past life information, entity attachment, you know, what books to read, because all it is a yes, no. So you say like, should I read this book or this book? And that you could get the pendulum to swing to the one you want, or is this the best book I should read now? Yes or no. Is this the best book I should read now? Yes or no. Which job you should take, which person you should date, anything and everything you can imagine. Today we use pendulums, L rods, and bobbers, but you could use things like your eyes, your body, your fingers. There's ways that people, so, you know, if you're doing it in public or whatever, so no one can see that you're actually swinging a pendulum. there's ways to do it all sorts of different ways. So this top picture here is their little tiny mini L rods, but that's what L rods look like. And this is what I use for health dowsing. And these are amazing. I've got stacks and stacks and hundreds and hundreds of these kind of charts. And what of course you would do is swing your pendulum like right in the middle right here. And you would say like, what is the most important, what is the most relevant issue that Paola is facing today? And you know, show me where it is. And then it would swing to whatever place, and whatever place is the place that's the most important place. And then you would go into, you know, if it said her heart, then I have other charts that would say, is it the arteries, the aorta, the ventricles, the capillaries, the, you know, it would have a list of all the things in the heart. And you really can narrow things down for health dowsing using these charts. And you can make them yourself or you can get them offline. So these are like the three main types of dowsing that you could see is usually chart dowsing, and this is for health. It's for attachments. A lot of people have a lot of, you know, things that are attached to them, and also these vitamins and minerals and anything, Bach flower remedies, homeopathy, pills, for again, pharmaceuticals, and you can do this for your pets as well. Like, what is the most beneficial food for my dog to eat? If your dog or your cat or whatever, your kid, your infant, you know, that can't talk to you and you can't get information from, you can douse for all this information and for allergies and all that kind of stuff. Home healing is another modality that I use, and it's kind of the same as map dowsing. So home healing, I have like lists of questions that we go through. We get a layout, a blueprint of the house, and then we go through to see if there's any detrimental energy lines running through the house that we can move, and you know, if we can narrow down what exactly the problem is. So these look for earth energy lines, geopathic stress, spirits, negative energy, and you know, hundreds of other things. Map dowsing is a good easy one as well to find lost pets, objects, or people. This is really easy. You really just have to print off a 1-page map of where you think whatever it is, and it could be a picture of the whole country, or it could be a picture of your backyard, or a picture of your area if you have a lost cat. And you really just take a straight line. So I just use like a ruler, and you just, you know, put the ruler, you know, going through one part of it, and you are dowsing and you're saying, please give me a yes when I cross over the line of where the missing pet is. The pendulum swings. You trace like you know, your pencil line down on the map, and then you take it from the bottom and you go up. So you end up with a bullseye of where you can find that missing object or pet or whatever it is. And I just have here, so again, you can practice this yourself. And all of these modalities, I think, are all, you know, practice makes perfect, and anyone can do this. Pendulums are insanely cheap. I just recently discovered Temu. I think I got pendulums for $4 or $3 or something like that on Temu. But you know, pendulums are cheap, and you don't have to use a pendulum. You could use a piece of fishing line and a nut on the end. You can use a necklace. You can cut a wire from a hanger, and you can bend it into an L rod. You can use a stick from a tree that's in the shape of Y, and you can use a Y rod. There's numerous, and like I said, there's ways that you could use your body and your fingers and your eyes and a whole bunch of things. And here's an easy way that you could do this at home as well. So you can have, say you just have a pendulum, you get a $3 pendulum on Temu. You can shuffle up a deck of cards upside down and put them on your table, and then douse each card and put your hand on the card and douse with your other hand and say, is this black? And it's either yes or no. So is it black? No. Is it red? Yes. Put it in the red pile. Next card. Is it black? No. Is it red? Yes. Put it in the black pile. And then at the end, turn them over and look at how good you did. And if you keep practicing like that, you'll get better and better. This is not necessarily like a psychic ability, but Paula listed it in the as part of the presentation, and I'll just quickly go over it because there's a lot of intuitive and, you know, paranormal information you can get from doing this. And ESP is used in all of these things as well. So QHHT is a modality of how to do a hypnotic regression. It was a practice developed by Dolores Cannon. Her technique was different at the time that she developed it, as she was getting her clients to go very, very deep into somnambulistic state. That is a very deep trance-like state that a lot of people that were doing regressions at the time could not get into. And I had been regressed numerous times. I paid a lot of money and it never worked for me. So, and they never used this technique before. They would just, like, you know, and count down from 20 basically, and then, you know, and then assume that I was going to be in some different state, and it didn't work. And that is the reason that I took this course, is to figure out how to, like, what's the loophole to be able to regress people that couldn't get regressed. So I just really wanted to find out what the, you know, like what the trick was. So this is a very deep trance state, and where one has exceptional recall and a heightened state of awareness. And this modality is used to help clients mainly explore past lives, speak to their higher selves. And what 90% of my clients, they're ill, and they want to understand why they're experiencing this illness, and they need answers, and they want to get healed. But there's also people that are, there's addiction issues. So it's a pattern that they want to break, and they want to find out what the pattern is and how to break it. A lot of people have traumatic memories from the past. They want to be able to go through them and be able to heal them. Yeah, and explore and heal traumas. People go to QHHT for numerous reasons, but in my experience, these are most of the reasons that people want. And here's another I put here: practice yourself, because you can go on to YouTube, and there's hundreds of YouTube videos that are called, you know, meditation regression hypnosis, self-regression, self-hypnosis. And I actually practiced. This is how I figured out how to be able to regress myself, actually, is finding some of these YouTube videos and, you know, putting on headphones and lying down and listening to what they were saying enough times. And I had to do it 20 or 30 times until I was finally able to let myself, you know, let go enough to be able to be seeing images of what could be a past life. But I couldn't do it at the beginning. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe I'm too, you know, left-brained or whatever, but you can practice this to get to and you can do it yourself. You don't have to go to someone that does QHHT. You can do it yourself, and you can practice yourself by watching some of these, listening to some of these videos. And again, just practicing it. Then you can get the information yourself. Okay, and channeling. So this is how I learned to channel, is from using QHHT. When I was finally able to be able to figure out how to hypnotize myself and get myself in this deep somnambulistic state, then in this state, I was able to ask to be talking to something and get answers back. And so I assumed that that was my higher self talking back to me the whole time. That's what I thought it was. It was only later that maybe I asked other questions, and they gave me answers that it wasn't my higher self. Sometimes it was, but sometimes I was able to pick up messages from elsewhere as well. So again, I learned how to do this by myself. I didn't have a teacher. I didn't read any books. I don't know if any books tell you how to do this, but all I had to do was figure out how to get into this really deep trance-like state. And from there, I just practiced, and I was eventually able to, you know, ask questions, get answers. And then after a while, I was able to get very specific questions, and I started being able to, you know, write the messages down, which I couldn't do at the beginning. So channeling is useful to connect with your higher self, gain clarity on issues for yourself or your loved ones, to hear messages or ask questions about anything. The books that I have written, I asked, one entire book was just like spiritual concepts. I'll say, like, how you know, talking to loved ones that have passed away, like, you know, people that are mediums, how you do this and what the relevance of this is, and if it's really them, and you know, how energy stays in houses where there's a traumatic event, or like haunted houses. Are haunted houses like real, and what is that energy that is like stuck in that house, and why is it there, and can you release it? All these different things that I could have, I guess, read you know, 100 books about, but I just started asking questions about these kind of, you know, new agey or spiritual concepts, and I started getting answers to them. And again, you can practice this yourself. Anyone can channel. You just need to bring yourself in this trance-like state by starting to meditate, and then you just need to listen. So most meditations, they're trying to get you to focus on your breath, or focus on something that's trying to keep you in a meditation state. But you don't have to only think about that. What you can do is relax yourself in this state, but then when your mind is clear, instead of focusing on your breath, start focusing on listening. Ask one question and then focus on listening and see if there's an answer that ends up coming back. And whether that's from your higher self or whatever, that's how you can start doing it. And this is the last slide. And other ESP modalities, there are many, many, many of them, but here's another handful of them is mediumship, which you can reach out and try speaking to your loved ones who have passed, or loved ones who have recently passed, or your friends or family, or, you know, people that ask you to talk to loved ones that have passed. Scrying is the big one. I love this modality. It has been around forever, and you can scry into a huge variety of different things as well. So of course there's something called, you know, crystal scrying, where you can get these big, in the old days, John Dee and Edward Kelly, they used to scry into a whole of different things, but big black onyx crystals. You can do this by burning wax, pouring wax into the water, and kind of just like tea leaves even, you know, seeing where where the wax goes. You can look into a bowl of ink, black ink. You can do water and oil. You can throw bones like, you know, some other religions might do, or shells, and you just throw these things, and then scrying is just kind of like seeing a pattern emerge in one of these things. So colored sand, a lot of people use, colored rice. I love using candles and mirrors and incense smoke. So I have a huge mirror set up beside my desk, because I do it here. And I put a candle in front of it, and then an incense stick in front of that. And the smoke that I look at through the mirror behind, like, so the candle light is lighting it up. You can, when you're meditating and when you're getting into these trance-like states, the smoke from the incense sticks starts looking like a movie and a motion picture, and like moving like a movie. So it's like moving, you know, you could see horses and people reading books. I saw all sorts of crazy things in there. But once you're in this trance-like state, it's really just your mind trying to help you pull in information from one of these different ways. And another way, and of course channeling, which I just talked about. Another way is psychometry, which Paul was talking about, which is, you know, you can hold on to someone's jewelry, someone who just passed away, their jewelry, and see if there's any information that's on that. I have my grandma's ring, and I was doing that after my grandma passed, like trying to get information from her ring. A lot of people go and buy antiques in the antique store, and then they have wood, which is a big holder of energy, and they can just touch something from an antique store and you know, feel the energy of the people that maybe had it in their house for 50 years or 100 years, or, you know, something like that. So there's lots of different modalities, but that's a very, I don't know, is that a quick setup of the ones I was using? So that is my PowerPoint.
That's wonderful. It's awesome. I mean, you know, my dream has always been, why can't we do a university of some kind where people can learn these things? Or why can't we do, even with my data, be able to disseminate it? And now you said you had some books. Can you just lift them up and show everybody if they started reading what they could read?
Oh, I've got tons of them. I'll just quickly show them, but this is a Joe McMoneagle book, Remote Viewing Secrets. He was one of the original people that were in the Project Stargate. This is Mind Reach from Hal Puthoff and Russ Targ. That's an older, well, that's an old cover, that's for sure. That's a really good one though. Here's another Russell Targ book, Reality of ESP. That's a good one. This is a newer one that I got, and this woman's like developed, this is a really good one, Jenny Tyson, and it's called The Art of Scrying and Dowsing. It's a newer one, but she has taken remote viewing and she's changed the protocols of remote viewing to do it from scrying and dowsing instead, and has set up a brand new protocol. And I thought it was not going to work, but it actually works quite well. I've got lots of books on scrying. This is called Scrying, The Secrets of the Future. Cassandra Eason, she's another big writer that does a lot of books. Charles Tart, maybe a lot of people know about. Scientific Studies of the Psychic Realm. That's an old one, oldie but a goodie. I've got tons. One of my teachers that taught me some of these dowsing classes is Adrian Weber. He's a British. I took a couple classes from him when I was in England. I don't know. Do you want me to hold up more?
It's a lot. But
That's a lot. I've got tons of dowsing books.
the one that had Russell Targ, that the preface was written by Richard Bach. And he is one of my very, very favorite writers. Richard Bach is Jonathan Livingston Seagull, if you remember the book. And then also he wrote a book called Illusions. You know, what is it? It was like the journey of a reluctant Messiah. And it's very small, but it's filled with wisdom. So I'm always going to say, and I'm always going to end by saying, if you want to study something, you could be really good at it, but you can't just do it in an 8-second podcast. you have to, we just saw all your books. I mean, you did a journey of learning. And if you could do this journey of learning and get these tips and get the lessons, then you'll master something. But before we end, just can you think of an instance where your psychic ability helped you at all on an everyday level, Desta, that you could share with us?
Well, I'll say quickly that there's lots of missing persons cases, and there's lots of help needed by some of these organizations. They're all nonprofit organizations, and I've worked for a few of them trying to solve missing cold cases of loved ones that have gone missing. And I've worked on a bunch of them, and it's interesting because we have circles of people of psychics or mediums or whatever that are all working on the same case. And it's really interesting to see when we all get together and share information, how, again, usually for these cases, there's not a lot of information. All we get is the person's name and their picture. And it's just like, you know, what do you get from this person? She's been missing for, could be 2 weeks, it could be 20 years. But it's one thing to just sit down and you know, work on it yourself. But when you can sit down with a circle of 10 other people that are all, you know, we all sit down, and take our notes and figure out what we get. Then we go around the circle and say, you know, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got this. And to be able to see 10 people in a row all get almost the exact same information about how someone disappeared and where they are and who took them is really, you know, not just motivating that, you know, you're right on target kind of thing, but for me, people don't usually do that. And so you don't know that you can do this. And I wouldn't know unless I can bounce my own, you know, my own information that I'm getting with a bunch of other people. And then you're like, oh my God, we could be finding way more people, way more pets, way more lost objects. If there was just people that could sit down and practice and have faith in themselves and then, you know, work with other people so they can see how good they are, we could be finding, you know, instead of the police trying to find it in like a very 3D, you know, way, there should be psychics, groups of psychics, I think, working on every case that could be helping figure out where all these people are, because there's hundreds of thousands of people that go missing every year in North America. And it's just crazy that everyone has to rely on the police to find someone that could be anywhere and they could be dead. And it's really astonishing for me to see when you sit down with a group of people that everyone gets the same information. That has to mean something. A lot of these times people are found, bodies are found, and it's just crazy to me that there isn't more people doing this kind of thing to be, helping their communities and these families more.
Well, this is a modality, as you said before, and it's very, very important that we realize that these things can not only help you, but help humanity, because it's a talent that we all have. It's a really interesting thing you just told me. Okay, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. This is so interesting for so many people. And both Desta and I encourage you to really develop your psychic abilities. Thanks, Desta.
Thanks, Paola. So nice to be here.